The recent release of N64 games on the Switch as part of the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pass has many players excited, and rightfully so. Revisiting some of the best games in the N64's library on a modern console that can also be played as a handheld? It sounds almost too good to be true. And the crazy part? It can get even better. While having NES, SNES, and N64 games on the platform is nice, I think there's one console in particular that if it came to NSO would blow the roof off when it comes to hype. Luckily for us, this console is the most likely next in line to be added to Nintendo's online service, the Nintendo GameCube. Naturally, I've been daydreaming about the possibility of GameCube games coming to NSO, so I decided to make my own lineup of launch games for a hypothetical GameCube Nintendo Switch Online service, if that ever happens. With a platform like the GameCube, where there are so many different games beloved by so many people, it's difficult to even know where to start. This is why, to begin, I took a look at the base lineup of games we already have for N64's Nintendo Switch Online. My initial strategy was to match each N64 game up with a counterpart from the GameCube to give me the most evidence-based version of a potential lineup that we could see at a Nintendo Switch Online GameCube launch. Of course, this isn't an exact science, so some exceptions had to be made. Let's get into the lineup. Matching the first 3 N64 titles with GameCube counterparts was super easy, and led to a couple no-brainer games being added. Super Mario 64 becomes Super Mario Sunshine. And just like 64, we can already play Sunshine in the 3D All-Stars collection, so this won't be that big of a deal, but we still have to have it on here. Zelda Ocarina of Time becomes Zelda Wind Waker. Also an easy swap, but this introduces my first caveat into this list: potential future releases. Say Nintendo has plans to bring the HD Wii U versions of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess to the Switch as standalone releases. Would that hinder either of these two GameCube Zelda games appearing in this NSO lineup? N64 Online included Ocarina of Time, but Ocarina of Time doesn't have a Wii U port that makes a ton of sense to release on Switch, like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess do. So it could be a different story. Either that, or these games could be added to the service as a way to play them in their original forms, without the changes made in the HD versions. For my final lineup, I'm going to include The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker and exclude Twilight Princess. Wind Waker is exclusive to the GameCube and is an iconic title that I feel is a must for any sort of NSO GameCube library. Personally, I think of Twilight Princess more of a Wii game anyways. Following Zelda is Mario Kart 64, which also has a one-to-one replacement in Mario Kart Double Dash. This would be a fantastic game to see running on Switch, and the potential of adding online multiplayer to Double Dash, just like how it was added to Super Mario Kart N64, is a tantalizing prospect. To be honest, if Double Dash was given online functionality via the Nintendo Switch Online platform, I'd probably play it more than Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The dual driver mechanic and some of the classic GameCube courses would be a blast to revisit on Switch, and it would be made all the better if it could be done online with friends. Double Dash is one of my all-time favorite Mario Kart titles, and an absolute lock for my Nintendo Switch Online GameCube lineup. Now, here's where it gets a bit more tricky. Most of the N64 games coming up don't have an exact one-to-one replacement like Mario and Zelda do, so I had to do some critical thinking here. The next N64 game I looked at was Star Fox 64, and naturally, I thought of Star Fox Adventures or even Assault as a replacement. But to be honest, although I do enjoy these games, and I know many others do too, I don't feel like Adventures or Assault had the same impact, and I don't feel like they are as important of a part of the GameCube's library as Star Fox 64 was to the N64 library. This is why I decided to go a different route. Star Fox 64 was a showcase title for the N64, so thinking about it this way, what was a showcase title for the GameCube? Easy. Pikmin, the next game I'm adding to my NSO GameCube launch lineup. Pikmin is an important title in the sense that it helped show off the GameCube's power and ability to render multiple characters on the screen at one time, and a classic, well-received game in its own right. Plus, Pikmin was never re-released outside of its awesome Wii Play Controls version, so the time is right to bring it to Switch. It would be great to see Pikmin become more accessible to Switch owners who perhaps played Pikmin 3 Deluxe on the platform and are curious about the earlier games in the series. Dr. Mario 64 is the next game on the N64 lineup. And with no Dr. Mario game on the GameCube, my next thought was to add one of the puzzle games from the GameCube lineup in its place. But the problem is, none of the GameCube puzzle games really stick out to me as classics that players would want to see in this lineup. This is why I had to start thinking from a different angle. Dr. Mario is a Mario spin-off series, so I started thinking if the GameCube had any Mario spin-offs. And of course, that's an extremely stupid question because it has way too many to even count. But I have to say that one of these stands above the rest as a title that really needs to be included at any kind of GameCube NSO launch. A launch title from the GameCube itself, the original Luigi's Mansion. A fan favorite GameCube title, Luigi's Mansion is yet another easy choice for my list. Luigi's Mansion boasts exceptional visuals and atmosphere for the time period it was released, so it would be stunning to see the original Luigi's Mansion running on the Switch. Plus, fans new to the series who have maybe only played the Switch's Luigi's Mansion 3 would have a chance to experience where it all started. There's no doubt in my mind that this classic Mushroom Kingdom spin-off needs to be added to GameCube NSO. And speaking of the Mushroom Kingdom, the next game from the N64 lineup is Mario Tennis 64. Even though there is a Mario Tennis title for GameCube, this is actually not what I went with for this spot in my lineup. I see Mario Tennis 64's inclusion as a chance to add whichever Mario sports game I want in my GameCube NSO launch lineup. And for me, the top Mario sports game I would like to see is actually Mario Golf Toadstool Tour. For me, this Mario Golf iteration is one of the most enjoyable Mario sports games that's ever been released, and its slower paced golf action would be perfectly suited for the addition of online multiplayer through NSO. Any Mario sports game would be great in this slot. It would be awesome to have one of the other GameCube sports classics like Strikers or Baseball in this lineup, but my favorite of the bunch is probably Toadstool Tour, and that's why I've added it here. I could definitely see myself playing a few rounds online with friends if an online featured version ever came to NSO, so I'm hopeful that one day that finally happens. Yoshi's Story is a tough one, because there really isn't a big Yoshi release in the GameCube library. So in this case, I went to one of Yoshi's closest peers, Kirby, for my next title. Though I'm not a huge fan of this game personally, Kirby Air Ride would be a fantastic choice for the GameCube Nintendo Switch Online launch library. First of all, it's a beloved GameCube title with a robust multiplayer that people would certainly be hyped for, especially if it was given online functionality through NSO. Also, the game has sort of been lost to time, with not many ways to play it in this day and age unless you still have your GameCube and copy of the game. Making Kirby Air Ride accessible to players again would be a great preservation move by Nintendo as well. I was a little bit wary of adding another pseudo racing game to my list when Double Dash is already on here, but if I'm honest with myself, I do see Kirby Air Ride as different enough from Mario Kart to offer a fresh experience for people who play both. And I think it would be a fantastic title to launch with the GameCube Online service if it ever comes to be. Now this second last spot, I probably had the most trouble picking a game for. The N64 title, Operation Winback, was a bit before my time. It's also from a genre I don't typically play, so it's never really been on my radar. I'd never even heard of the game until I saw it announced as part of the Nintendo Switch Online N64 collection. This made it a bit hard to continue my strategy of matching the N64 list to my GameCube list, since I didn't have a great idea on what it was about. After some research, I came to the conclusion that Winback played a little bit like Resident Evil games, which were huge hits on the GameCube. So naturally, I thought, oh perfect, a place to slot in Resident Evil 4. But then I realized 4 was already available on Switch, along with several other Resident Evil titles. Like I was saying before, this might not necessarily be a barrier for these games coming to a potential GameCube NSO library. Just look at Super Mario 64, and I already added Sunshine to my list. But in my mind, having these games readily available for purchase on the Switch eShop does make it a bit more unlikely. Why offer a game that's already on the console? Mario might just be the exception, because, he's Mario. You really can't have an N64 library without Mario 64. That's pretty much blasphemy. After some thought, Resident Evil eventually lost out to a similar title, a well-loved Nintendo-published GameCube exclusive that was no doubt inspired by Capcom's famous survival horror series. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem deserves a spot on GameCube NSO, as it is one of the most unique experiences on the platform. Not only is it a great action horror game, it did some unforgettably innovative things that haven't really been replicated or matched since. I won't get too deep into things for the sake of spoilers, but having a modern release of Eternal Darkness would be a massive treat for both fans of the game and people looking to experience it for the first time. My only reservation about Eternal Darkness is, would Nintendo put a game rated M for mature on an NSO GameCube library that they know many children would be playing? I could definitely see this as a serious barrier to Eternal Darkness's inclusion, but there are some ways around it. If Nintendo were to include it in a GameCube lineup, they could lock the game behind parental controls in the system settings. Or perhaps they could put a disclaimer before purchase or download of the expansion pass update. I think seeing Eternal Darkness as part of a GameCube Nintendo Switch Online launch is not impossible, and I think many would be happy at this cult classic's triumphant return to modern hardware. We finally made it to the final spot of my NSO GameCube launch lineup, and when I look at the N64 lineup for guidance on my choice, I see the Japanese exclusive rail shooter Sin and Punishment in this final spot. The game I ended up picking for my list, though, is nothing like Sin and Punishment. It's nothing like anything else, really. Sin and Punishment is an N64 title that was exclusive to Japan, and I saw this as a great opportunity. I think it would be cool to add a foreign release to my GameCube NSO launch library as well. And when I think of GameCube foreign releases, one game has always come to mind. That weird trophy from Melee, Doshin the Giant. Admittedly, I know next to nothing about Doshin the Giant, which is why I think it would be especially cool if it was added to the expansion pass as a treat for us American fans. It could come over strictly in Japanese, or there was a European release that could be included instead. It would be amazing to have this exceptionally strange entry in Nintendo's development catalog come to the US in some official capacity, and packaging it as a fun bonus in a Nintendo GameCube NSO library would be the perfect way to do it. Though Doshin is not the most critically acclaimed game, it's still just so darn intriguing. All the footage I watch makes me really want to dive in myself and check it out. I, for one, would be very interested in seeing what Doshin has to offer. So I have my fingers crossed that Nintendo has the same idea that I do when it comes to including a foreign release in a Nintendo Switch Online GameCube launch. So there you have it, what I would pick for a launch lineup of the hypothetical Nintendo GameCube Nintendo Switch Online. Remember, this is just for launch. This definitely wouldn't be the full library, as just like the N64 before it, new games would likely be added on a periodic basis. With a library of games as vast as the GameCube's, Nintendo could probably continue adding awesome games to this collection until 2026. But in reality, they'll probably cut the list down to just a handful of classics. There's way too many to talk about, but flashing across the screen now are some of the games I would love to see added down the line to the NSO GameCube lineup. You might have been going through this whole video screaming at me about two very important games I'm missing here. I'm sure you know which ones I'm talking about. The best-selling game on the console, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and the game that started the craze, the original Animal Crossing. Unfortunately, I'm making a stand that I don't think these two games, despite their huge popularity, will ever make it on a GameCube NSO lineup if that ever arrives. For Smash, I believe Melee is a game that would need to be technically flawless if it were to ever come over to Switch, and I'm not sure that this is realistic. Melee still has an active competitive scene that Nintendo officially acknowledges, and because of this, I just don't see them releasing a version of the game that is competitively unplayable. Plus, people will expect online features to be added to the game, just like the other multiplayer games in the library. And for Melee in particular, this would take an incredible amount of work, getting things to run smoothly, implementing matchmaking, etc. As much as I would love to see it, I don't see Super Smash Bros. Melee heading to NSO, and I foresee a similar fate for another one of my favorites, Animal Crossing. A key feature in the original Animal Crossing was the ability for multiple players to play in the same town and visiting other towns by plugging in a friend's memory card. Though I could see the single player of Animal Crossing working on Switch without a hitch, I'd argue that the multiplayer aspect is too important to the core experience. And though I could see it working in theory by utilizing multiple Switch user accounts or through online multiplayer, I think the development work to implement something like this would be too much for a simple NSO release. Then again, I have no idea what goes into developing this type of thing, so I could be totally wrong. It's just my hunch. I want to know what you think. Do you think there will ever be an NSO GameCube expansion? If so, what games would you like to see added to it? I'm super curious, so tell me your GameCube game lineups in the comments. What did you think of my list? Did I miss any GameCube games that need to be there at launch? I'm crossing my fingers and toes that we do see something like this coming to the Switch Online expansion pass within the next 1 or 2 years. But while we wait, remember to subscribe to the channel for more quality Nintendo content. Thanks for watching.